Welcome to the Under 8 podcast, a 3 times per week college basketball show brought to you in under 8 minutes. At the time of recording, it's Saturday, March 30th at 12:15 a.m. My name is Josh Mullenix. On today's pod, the ACC is doing the thing and sometimes not doing the thing. Upsets going both the directions. The Big 12, after Houston's loss to Duke, is done. And Tennessee and Creighton round out the Elite Eight late on Saturday night. Tennessee successfully beating the Blue Jays. It's all right now on the Under 8 podcast. Josh Doering here with me, 12:17 a.m. Josh, the ACC is a very, very big part of this NCAA tournament. And we've talked about both in preseason with Brendan Marks. We've talked about the ACC throughout the regular season. What is this conference's place in high major college basketball nowadays? And while I refuse to make a sweeping declaration about how good the ACC was, and we just didn't realize it, because that's not necessarily true. It is at least having a big impact on this NCAA tournament, and 3 results in the round of 16 that we did not think we were going to get necessarily.
Yeah, and maybe I would be a little bit more inclined to have some of that conversation. I'm with you that we're not going to have that full conversation had North Carolina won. But now you are looking at Clemson, who had really good stretches and bad stretches this season. Obviously, a very good basketball team. NC State, who is still 8-4 in their last 12 games, and whose coach might have gotten fired. And Duke, who had some circumstances that assisted them in this win. We'll get to that later. So obviously, yes, this is a big story. You have 8 teams remaining. 3 of them are from the ACC. You're seeing what, for example, NC State can do now that they're putting everything together. And it is important for I guess I'll put it this way. I feel like it's important for the ACC when you don't have as much relevance during the regular season, when Duke is not great. I mean, obviously a very good team, but not, top 5 in the country. UNC was up there this season, but you have UNC lose. It is important to get the ACC as part of the conversation for the NCAA tournament on the men's side because of what this conference typically represents. I guess that's what I would say generally before we get into these games.
Sure. Let's start with UNC. Alabama 89, UNC 87. And the first number that jumps off the screen when you go and look at the box score, Josh, RJ Davis, 4 of 20 from the field. If you add Elliot Cadeau to that equation, it's 7 of 29 total between those two guys. And RJ Davis, very much the reason that North Carolina is a 1 seed this year, very much a reason that North Carolina went 29-8 this year. And a big part of why they weren't able to take down Alabama. A tough night for Davis, individually 0 of 9 from the 3-point line, gets to 16 points basically because he went to the free throw line 9 times.
It's not, it was a good time when it happened, but if you would have told me that Elliot Cadeau would have hit more threes than RJ Davis, that's not good. And yeah, it was a really tough game for him. And when your role players were making threes, when Cormac Ryan had that explosion in the first half, it was okay because he wasn't forcing things. Generally, I still think he took good shots. They just didn't go in.
Sure.
It became a problem when those other guys stopped making shots. And then you did see him make a couple plays to kind of keep – it was very clear they were going to live or die with him at the end of this game. In those final couple possessions, he made some plays, didn't make some plays. Alabama ultimately made more plays. We'll get to that in a minute. But they they were going to ride or die with him. Ultimately, they died because he just had a really, really bad game at a bad time. But despite that, they still, according to ESPN's metrics, had a 67.4% chance to win with 132 left. It's not like RJ Davis single-handedly lost to this game. There were Alabama just played better, obviously, in that last minute and a half. Grant Nelson was phenomenal in the second half. And Alabama had 2 good defensive stretches, which is more than you usually see from this team. And you got to give them some credit here because they were really good defensively against Grand Canyon, and they had some to get themselves back in the game. They had a good defensive stretch at the beginning of the second half, and then obviously at the very end to get those stops they needed to hold on to this win and to complete the comeback. When you shoot the ball the way that they shot the ball in this game and you got so many players producing, that's all you need when you're that good offensively. And ultimately, it was just a coin flip game. I don't think we need to – I refuse to make it more than that. That this is some larger commentary on UNC, on RJ Davis, on the way Alabama plays, any of that. Alabama can win these kind of games when they shoot the ball well. We've been saying that forever. And this is another example, and they came up and they made some plays defensively, which you got to give them credit for.
Yeah, I mean, it's RJ Davis went 4 of 20. That's why Alabama won this game. It's not more complicated than that. It's just not. I mean, if he's 7 of 20, Alabama wins the game. If he's 6 of 20, Alabama wins the game. I mean, North Carolina wins the game. I think you're right that that there's at least some credit that falls to Alabama's defense. I'm not sure that giving up 87 points in a regulation NCAA basketball game, I'm not sure that much credit falls to you.
They weren't great for 40 minutes, but they had a couple stretches.
Sure. Grant Nelson, 24 and 12, 6 of 9 from the field, hit a couple of threes, and it was ultimately a pretty balanced performance. Say you had 4 guys in the starting lineup have at least 18 points, and that was enough. You got basically nothing from anybody else, but it was enough, and to get you to where you needed to be at the end of the game and make a few plays, have things go your way, and you're still playing basketball on Saturday.
Yep.
On the other side of things, on the other side of upsets, the ACC had a very, very nice Sweet 16. Clemson 77, Arizona 72. RJ Davis's former backcourt mate Caleb Love had a similar game to the one that RJ Davis did. Clemson, a team that has benefited from some poor 3-point shooting on the side of their opponents in this tournament, but to their credit, they got another stinker from Arizona in this one. Arizona was just 5 of 28 from the 3-point line, and PJ Hall had 1, not 2 halves without getting into foul trouble. He got 1 half without getting into foul trouble. Ian Shefflin was awesome. Chase Hunter making big plays down the stretch. And it was just one of those games that if Arizona's clicking, they're probably too much for Clemson, but they weren't clicking on all cylinders. And Brad Brownell's squad got enough from their most important players and made big shots down the stretch to get the job done. And that's a lot of what making runs as a 6 seed is about in the NCAA tournament, is taking advantage of what of the shortcomings of your opponents.
Clemson's been really good defensively. This is, yes, Arizona and Caleb Love in particular couldn't hit the broadside of a barn for parts of this game. But just over the tournament, Clemson has been one of the best defensive teams. So I want to give them some credit for that too. That part of the reason nobody is hitting threes against them is that they're doing something right defensively. Not exclusively that, but they are contributing to.
But 18% is 18%.
Yes, it can't be just. It's a combination of things when it's that bad. Sure, yeah, absolutely. I think you've got some things you want to say on the Clemson side. So are you okay if I start on the Arizona side for a second and then we kind of shift over?
Sure.
Yeah. So the starting backcourt was 8 of 33.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if Jaden Bradley didn't come in and produce, this game isn't even close.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that needs to be acknowledged. And this might be my hot take thing here, but this is now 3 top 2 seeds for Tommy Lloyd and 0 Elite 8 appearances. I picked that number because theoretically that's where you're supposed to get as a 2 seed, right?
Theoretically.
Again, I'm not going to be hypocritical and make a huge deal out of this. I just want to point out that Purdue's taken so much criticism. Virginia, Kentucky, all of these programs, specifically because they lose the first game, right? And I know Kentucky has happened a couple times, Purdue's has happened a couple times. Virginia just doesn't have a philosophy that is built to win in the NCAA tournament unless you have multiple NBA caliber players. They won the national championship the one time they did. But to me, the weird things happen in one game, right? Maybe Purdue makes the Final Four last season if they get through FDU. I would be more frustrated if it was just consistently, and this goes back to Sean Miller. Now, Sean Miller did get to Elite Eight. Sean Miller did have a little bit more NCAA tournament success. But just this idea that if I see Arizona in my bracket, I am not scared. Because this happens every season. And part of it is, I've come to the conclusion, the way that they play. They are so open and so free that you bring in, and we talked about this from the beginning, you bring in a Caleb Love. If everything goes right and you're good enough defensively, Caleb Love's the guy that can get you from the Sweet 16 to the Elite Eight or from the Elite Eight to the Final Four. Caleb Love is also the guy that can prevent you from getting to the Elite Eight or prevent you from getting to the Final Four. This is more consistent than anything else out there in terms of you don't trust Purdue, in terms of Kentucky, because Calipari made a run of, 7 Elite Eights in 10 years. I know it's been a little while. The game has changed, all of that. But not being able to trust Arizona to do what they're supposed to do is the single most consistent thing in this inconsistent environment. And I feel like of all of the people that are getting all of the criticism, and I'm not paying close attention to how Arizona's fans feel about this or things like that, but just as a general observation, to me, the program, and at this point, the coach at the top of that list, if you want to take a lot of stock in this, and if you want to make it a big deal, it's not Matt Painter, it's not Calipari, it is Tommy Lloyd in Arizona, because this has been a thing, and it continues to be. There was nothing surprising about the way that this happened.
So a couple things. One, you can't rope Tommy Lloyd into Arizona's program history. That's a dumb thing to do.
Well,
you're not allowed to do that.
It's he hasn't figured out how to change the narrative that existed prior to it.
Sure, but that's still irrelevant.
Him.
What happened before Tommy Lloyd got to Arizona is irrelevant to Tommy Lloyd in his ability to win tournament games. I mean, you're allowed to make the observation, but to imply that Tommy Lloyd carries the weight of former Arizona coach failure on his shoulders is silly.
Sure. I wasn't necessarily trying to say that. Sure.
The other part is that, like, Calipari's been at Kentucky for 15 years. Painter's been at Purdue for 15 years. Mm-hmm. Lloyd's been at Arizona for 3. Jay Wright's been at Virginia for 10 years, 12 years.
Tony Bennett, yeah.
Tony Bennett. What did I say?
Yeah.
Jay Wright. Sorry. Tony Bennett.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the answer to your question. And one of those was in a tournament that really nobody cared about anything that happened except for the fact that Gonzaga and Baylor ended up in the Final Four and in the national championship playing against each other. Nobody cared what happened in that tournament. But are you upset that other coaches are more scrutinized, or that Tommy Lloyd is not?
It's much more. This is coming to the defense of the other coaches. Yes.
Okay.
And my point specifically being, yes, obviously they've been there longer. Maybe Tommy Lloyd makes some adjustments and changes this, and then you got to give him immense amount of credit because he is carrying the weight of Sean Miller behind him, and it then becomes the guy to fix it. These are all snapshots, though, right? It's Calipari in the last 4 years. It's Matt Painter in the last few years because they still make a bunch of Sweet 16s, right? The criticism is a small period of time. That's why I'm roping Arizona in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but people aren't criticizing Painter for the last 4 years. They're criticizing Painter for subconsciously, the Robbie Hummel years, the Dakota Mathias years, like all of like
For
it's
not getting
like
to a Final Four, you're saying?
yeah, like Painter. It's not like Painter was really awesome in his first 4 years,
Yeah, I
and
guess that's a little bit more specific to Calipari then, because he had so much NCAA tournament success over a decade that
sure.
people just, and because I think the Painter conversation, it changed from he hasn't gotten to the Final Four and maybe he hasn't capitalized on some of his really good teams to you can't trust these guys in the tournament because they lose to North Texas and FDU, which is not the case this season. I just wanted to make that observation that to me, I put more stock into consistently not living up to expectations than one season where you lose one game. That's in the most basic level what I'm trying to get at here, and go to the defense of the coaches, not come after Tom Boyd.
Fair. Arizona 72, Clemson 77, NC State 67, Marquette 58. Golden Eagles couldn't hit the broadside of the barn. They were 4 of 31 from the 3-point line. That's 12.9% by my quick math. 20 of 60 from the field. Weren't that much better from the free throw line. 14 of 23. It was just an ugly night where, honestly, on top of that, you got very little from guys not named Cam Jones and Tyler Kolek. So it was a bunch of different things going on here, and it results in a 9-point loss, and you only score 58 points to end your season.
6 field goals, to be specific, outside of Tyler Kolek and Cam Jones.
Sure.
This is why they needed the depth that they just don't have because of the injuries, and because Oso Ighodaro just wasn't that guy. And generally this season, he just wasn't that guy. That to me is where this all turned, and I kind of fell out of love with this Marquette team, is because he just, especially as the season went on, and I know that they've all been battling injuries and it's been kind of in and out of the lineup and all kinds of things. That part of it, and the fact that they just don't have the pieces right now in terms of just the other players who can contribute.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, Sean Jones coming off the bench. I really think that changed their ceiling and changed their season because of what he can give you, and the fact he can just go on a 6-0 personal run or can go give you 15 points off the bench. They don't have that guy anymore. And so when nobody else outside of your two guys are scoring, this is a problem. And it's also why I'm willing to a certain extent, give Shaka Smart. I know he's another one who's going to start hearing this if he's not already with the way the last couple of seasons ago. To me, you got to separate the two because there were some extenuating circumstances here. And I mean, this NC State team, they're playing great defense. Their guards are delivering. DJ Horn was really good in this game. And DJ Burns was a monster without even scoring the basketball because of what he was doing with his passing, his rebounding, his defense. And they're built very differently. The context is very different because, again, this team is still only 8-4 in their last 12 games. But there is some UNC vibes in this to me, in the sense that they clearly have figured something out. And the way that they're now playing through DJ Burns, they beat, right, the best teams in the ACC. They beat Marquette now. It's not like they've just beat a bunch of bad teams during the stretch, and they've done it for 8 straight games. This is obviously not who they were during the season, and you got to ask questions as to why it took this long to figure it out. But this is NC State is legit. This talent is real. There's nothing fluky about the way they're playing right now. And that reminds me of what we saw with that UNC team. Obviously, it's designed differently, but this idea of, well, do you trust it for an extended period of time? No. But is it legit right now? Is this who you're facing in the next round if you're NC State's opponent? Absolutely.
Yeah. I I thought this game was more about Marquette not being able to make anything than about NC State. This is the one that when you're an 11 seed, you need to get lucky with someone's 3-point shooting, with
Mhm.
someone's inability to just score at all. I
You
mean,
could
like you
tell very
said,
early on it was going to be one of those days for Marquette.
the the NC State backcourt was really good. The NC State front court was really impactful. It was just a more complete performance from NC State on this particular day. And I'm allowed to tip that and also say that if
Mhm.
Marquette shot the ball well, Marquette was going to win this game. Marquette looked like they might end up still winning this game after everything that had happened when they were only down by 6 with 3.5 minutes left.
Mhm.
And they had gone on like a 12-5 run or whatever it was. Like there was a moment around the under 4 that it looked like Marquette was going to come back and win it. And of course it didn't happen. NC State, to their credit, get some big buckets, and Marquette not able to, make the next run on top of the run that they made to kind of give themselves a chance. But yeah, they deserve a ton of credit. And they are, whether it's the magic juju of March or something else, it's a good run. It's a great run that deserves a ton of credit, and and we'll see if it's a team that they've already beat once in the last month in a single elimination tournament
Yep.
setting. That's where this run started, was with a win over Duke. So it'll be quite something if they're able to do it again and this time punch a ticket to the Final Four.
Yeah. All of a sudden, this thing opened right up here.
Which is interesting because, like, you still have to beat Duke again.
Mhm.
Duke just beat, like, I feel like there's this collective sigh for NC State more than Duke. That now
Yeah.
it's, wow, NC State only has to beat Duke to go to the Final Four.
Mhm.
You mean they
As
have to
opposed to
beat?
Duke only has to beat an 11 seed
Yeah,
to get to the Final Four,
yeah, a
and
team
a team
and
I'm familiar with.
yeah,
Yeah.
that they lost to 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. And also, before we get into the Duke game in particular here, I this is what I kind of this was my Kentucky theory. It wasn't necessarily as much that I was wholeheartedly in love with Kentucky as much as it was what I believed Kentucky could do offensively and the way that this bracket could shake out because of Marquette's injuries, because of the offensive questions about Houston that will just always exist for me as much as I believed in this team when healthy this season. This idea of this could open up for somebody very quickly. And it happened to be Duke is the team, not Kentucky, because Duke
Mhm.
has done their job, taken advantage of the breaks that they've gotten, blew the doors off of James Madison. They just took down the number 1 seed. And obviously a big part of this is Jamal Shed getting injured because we were we were texting at the beginning of this game. I tweeted it. I stand by it. I qualified it. I texted you and said I'm 95% sure this game is over after 3 possessions. I tweeted and said obviously it's too early to be sure, but I've never been more confident a game is over after 3 possessions, and I stand by that because things can happen. And Jamal Shed got hurt, and Duke, to their credit, did eventually figure this out. I still firmly believe if Jamal Shed's healthy, Houston wins this game, but he wasn't, and Duke made the plays down the stretch. Jeremy Roach was terrific. Ryan Young was really, really good. He didn't fill up the stat sheet, but just from a physicality presence standpoint to match what Houston was offering, they needed him out there, and he came up big. They got their stop. And to me, Houston's defense wasn't as good in the second half, that Jeremy Roach was kind of able to get to his spots. And I felt like in the first half, it was very much what I expect from Houston. They just couldn't keep her for 40 minutes. Probably some of that is that they're exhausted because they're down 3 players that would have been playing important roles here. And so somebody did have this opportunity here, and Duke is taking advantage. And right now we've got an all ACC rematch here to see who's going to the Final Four.
If I'd have told you yesterday that Jamal Shed would play 12 minutes in this game, would you have picked Duke to win it?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to say no, just because when he got hurt, I still thought Houston was going to win.
So that means Duke deserves credit tonight.
Yes, absolutely.
And I don't think Duke's going to get credit for this one. I think the first sentence out of everybody's mouth is going to be Jamal Shed was hurt.
got hurt.
And that's fair. But Duke still achieved a level of physicality and toughness that I did not think they had.
No question. They got punched in the mouth and they responded and they solved the problem and they answered the bell 100%.
And it's not like it got that much easier after Jamal Shed went out.
No,
like
it's Houston.
Houston probably, not probably. Houston had a tougher time scoring than they would have if Jamal Shed was on the floor. But
which is ultimately why I think they win if he's there.
Sure.
But Duke still has to do this job. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And like Kyle Filipowski, I thought was the toughest guy on the floor, on the entire floor.
Him and Ryan Young, those two guys.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's not something I would have thought I would say, regardless of if Jamal Shed was playing or not. So I think the two things are allowed to exist simultaneously.
Absolutely.
That yes, Duke probably doesn't win this game if Jamal Shed doesn't turn his ankle halfway through the first half. But if I got the Duke team that I've been seeing for a lot of this season from a toughness and physicality perspective, and when things aren't going our way exactly, we kind of roll over. Houston still wins this game, even without Jamal Shed. And they didn't, and I think Duke deserves credit for that.
I said from the very clearly, I just don't know how to predict Duke games, so I need to stop trying to do that. But I said from the very beginning, this is a perfect matchup for Houston for that very reason. So it would be hypocritical of me to then come back and say, no, when Jamal Shed got hurt, I still expected Duke to win.
Mm-hmm.
When I thought that this was of every team in the bracket, this is the one that Duke would want to avoid the most. And of any of the teams that have a legitimate threat to beat Houston, of any of the top 4 seeds, Duke would have been the team I would have wanted to play if I was Houston.
Mm-hmm.
Not the Duke team that showed up tonight.
And it's not, and they didn't do it on the back of 30 from Jared McCain or a crazy night from Tyrese Proctor. I mean, Filipowski was awesome, 16 and 9, but on 6 of 14 shooting, and that's with 3 of 5 from the 3-point line. And like you said, Jeremy Roach was big in the second half, but it's not like, I mean, they shot 40% from the field and 35% from the 3-point line, and we're 8 of 12 from the stripe. Like, that's not getting handed a bunch of freebies.
No, and it was Jared McCain getting into the lane in a couple times in the first half when they couldn't score. It was Tyrese Proctor making some shots and coming away with a couple steals in the second half. Mm-hmm. It was Filipowski and Ryan Young more than holding their own on the inside. It was, even if it doesn't look great on the box score for everybody, or Jeremy Roach was a non-factor in the first half, Tyrese Proctor was a non-factor in the first half. Everybody did their job ultimately over the 40 minutes. And that's what Houston's going to do. Houston is going to make you beat them. Now, this Houston team without Jamal Shed, I would argue, can't necessarily beat you when you have the talent that Duke does, but they are going to make you beat them. And that is what Duke did.
The Big 12 is done because Illinois beat Iowa State as well in the Sweet 16, 72-69. It was the Terrence Shannon Jr. Curtis Jones Bowl, as we all predicted. Terrence Shannon Jr., 29 points, assists, steals, rebounds, like he does. 10 of 19 from the field, 4 of 10 from the 3-point line. He was the spearhead on the Illinois side of things. Some key players on the Iowa State side in the starting lineup having slower nights. Curtis Jones off the bench, 26 points is the reason that Iowa State had a chance to win this basketball game. But ultimately, the Cyclones come up short in the battle of the best offense versus the best defense. The Big Ten conference champions are still dancing on their way to the Elite Eight.
Yeah. Forget about the free throws for a second and the fact that Iowa State didn't play offense outside of Curtis Jones in the first half. Because you put those two things together, if Illinois had hit free throws, they would have been up 15-20. Had Iowa State figured out how to do something offensively, they wouldn't have been down as much as they were at halftime. To me, this game came down to one single thing, because these teams are right there. I might even still argue Iowa State is the better team, although it's splitting hairs. The difference was the decision making in a variety of different ways. It was Iowa State's awful shot selection and impatience in the first half. Illinois is a bad defensive team, and Illinois put in a good effort defensively. Iowa State also made them look like a much better defensive team than they are in the first half. And then all of a sudden in the second half, Keyshawn Gilbert decided he was going to wake up, and the first 3 or 4 possessions, they got right to the rim. And I went, there's Illinois' defensive vulnerability for you. But it took them a half to figure that out. You can't do that against Illinois. Second, the amount of times, from a schematic standpoint, Brad Underwood won this matchup because off of every trap, first of all, Coleman Hawkins just made good decision after good decision. That is part of the problem, that Iowa State loves to trap people, and Coleman Hawkins is the solution to that problem, just like DJ would be, because they're such great passers, and obviously they're so tall that they can just see everything. So Hawkins' decision-making was a big reason they won. And then the other part of it was, on multiple occasions, specifically at the beginning of the game, they're trying to recover in rotation because Coleman Hawkins has beat them out of the trap, or Marcus Domask has beat him off the trap. And I watched players run away from Terrence Shannon. I don't care who he is going to then pass the ball to and continue the movement. I don't care if it's Luke Goody. I don't care if it doesn't matter. You can't let him have the open threes because he knocked him down, and then all of a sudden he was in a rhythm to the point where he came off the bench again after his 4 fouls and then immediately knocked down another 3 on a possession where I went, oh, they're sagging off in the corner. Can't do that. Sure enough, the ball swings and he hits the 3. That I don't have too much more on this game other than, to me, that was the difference, is that Illinois was smarter, made better decisions, and deserved to win as a result. Because Iowa State had this game nearly tied a couple times, and they missed some layups and just couldn't get that last play to kind of get all the way back in the game and build that confidence up. And ultimately, Terrence Shannon came back and said, I'll take this one. Thank you very much.
There you go. Illinois, 72, Iowa State, 69. Last but not least, and what was ultimately a game of runs?
Was it ever?
Especially in the second half. Tennessee, the number 2 seed in the Midwest, 82, Creighton 75. Despite some very nice performances from the likes of Baylor Shireman, Ryan Kalkbrenner was pretty good. Stephen Ashworth was 4-6 from the 3-point line. Even Trey Alexander, not the best of nights, but got to 13 points. I mean, their big 4 showed up, I think would be a fair characterization of what you got from the Blue Jays, but it was Tennessee jumping out to a lead in the early stages, mid stages of the second half, putting Creighton on their back foot. Dalton Connect 24. Zakai Ziegler was excellent in this one, 18 points. Had 18 points, but he also had 6 assists to 1 turnover. He and Dalton Connect an 11-to-1 assist to turnover ratio in this game, which is not nothing. Josiah Jordan James 17. It was more than enough for a Tennessee team that is this good to get to the Elite Eight.
Ziegler also caused all kinds of problems defensively.
Oh, yeah. He was all over the place.
To the point where basically Creighton couldn't run their offense the way they want to because, well, Stephen Ashworth just, it didn't make sense for him to be the one bringing the ball up the floor because Zakai Ziegler was on him.
Yeah.
It was, I know you give him a hard time sometimes. That was a sensational performance, while also letting Dalton Connect still be the best player on the team.
I would say I don't give Zakai Ziegler a hard time. I give the idea of a 5'10" guy being your most important offensive creator a hard time.
Which is no longer,
and that's also not his fault.
Yes.
So,
which you've been very fair about. Yeah.
So it is much more advantageous for Dalton Connect to be the guy and Zakai Ziegler to be able to fill this role on it.
Yes. And like you said, the other role players kind of did their job. It was an 18-0 run that ultimately Creighton they nearly did, but they couldn't come back from. Alexander really struggled. Ryan Kalkbrenner made some weird decisions. There were a couple times where Greg McDermott was not pleased with him, to say the least. They really struggled with that Tennessee defense in the first half. They did kind of figure it out in the second half a little bit too late. This is just, if Tennessee was in any other region, maybe outside of UConn, but that's what I was thinking about watching this game, is this is exactly what I expected Tennessee to look like. And I think you're right there too. that Dalton Connect's going to do his thing. He's the guy that's going to lead you there. If they just get enough from everybody else, the defense, having a secondary scorer in Ziegler, and they didn't have Vescovy in this game. He's really struggled this season, but maybe he gets going one game. He obviously helps them defensively. They got enough, and if they get enough, boy, are they dangerous, and they are so hard to beat. And you're just looking at these other regions, and I mean, of the teams remaining, I would pick Tennessee third in terms of most likely to win a national championship. It just so happens they're playing the team that I have at number 1 or number 2.
Yeah.
And so they just caught a bad break in the way that the brackets played out, because there has been some chaos now, and we've got a bunch of teams that weren't expected to be here that are still here, and Tennessee is now staring at Purdue.
Are you ready to crown Dalton Connect the best transfer of all time yet?
I certainly can't think of one that's better.
I can't either. It's not really a conversation I want to have right this second, but that dude is so good, and I'm all aboard the Dalton Connect train. Yeah, I thought that Tennessee would. I guess for the most part, I thought Tennessee would control a game that ended with a final score similar to this. I thought they would control a game like this a little bit more. I don't really know what the takeaway from that is. I thought either this would be a Tennessee game that they controlled, or the final score would be like 58-56. Neither of those things really happened. I suppose Tennessee was really kind of grabbed the game by the stones in the second half, and then Creighton kind of went on their run and didn't get the second run to really feel like the game was in jeopardy in the last.
It certainly wasn't under
90
control,
seconds.
though.
Right. But it's another game that Tennessee wins in a way that is different from years past. I guess that's the takeaway, that they just win basketball games. It doesn't really matter how they do it. There's not a formula that they have to stick to win games, and that's why they are more dangerous than any other Tennessee team that has been highly thought of the last 5 years or so.
No doubt.
We have an Elite Eight. We will be back to discuss said Elite Eight on Sunday evening. Knowing the NCAA, those games will start at 9:39 and 10:07, even though there's only 2 games to watch, so it'll make no sense. I actually think it's like
6:09 and 8, yeah.
Something like that. So,
well, we got games tomorrow too.
Indeed. So we'll be back to talk about the Elite Eight, the Final Four that will be set by the time we get to Sunday evening. Then we'll be back on Monday night to talk about the women's side of the NCAA tournament. Until then, that's it. Under 8 Pod. It is Saturday, March 30th. It's now pushing 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm tired of being here and I'm ready to go to bed, with all due respect. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your shows. Follow the Under 8 Pod on Twitter. Subscribe on YouTube. Thank you so much for being here. We will see you on Sunday.